Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hi, this is Tammy Patzer, and I am happy to introduce you to Laura Medeiros. She has 4 adult coloring books, and right now she is living outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm just thrilled to have Laura on the call tonight. Hey, Laura, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Great. So, Laura, tell me a little bit about who you have designed your coloring books for and how you got started.
Well, I'll start with how I got started.
Okay.
And I've been doing the coloring book thing for not quite a full year, and started in June of last year. And I had just found out that I didn't have any classes for the summer. I'm an adjunct instructor, and I didn't have any classes for the summer, so I was kind of at odds end. And I was just doing a lot of drawing, trying to figure out what I needed to do. And I was looking at my drawings, and it's like, I really need to do something with these. And a friend of mine, who is a coloring book artist, Roots of Design, has been doing pretty well selling her coloring pages. And so I thought, I'll look into this. Maybe I should do this. So I started looking on Etsy at all the different coloring pages, the individual pages that were out there. And I started thinking in terms of how I would spend my money. And I was looking at the cost of individual pages versus the cost of a full book. And so I'm like, I don't think, I put up a couple of pages, and I thought, maybe I'll go and just do a whole coloring book. Because, somebody's going to want to get more bang for their buck. They'll do that with a coloring book, not buying individual pages. At least this was my thinking at the time. So I started researching how to self-publish, and that's how I got into it. I started with the drawing, and then decided maybe I'll make these drawings into coloring books.
So did you self-publish using Amazon? CreateSpace?
Yeah, I self-published with CreateSpace. I actually did a lot of research. I am originally a graphic designer by training, and so I'm very familiar with the print industry. And so I was interested in what the print quality was going to be like, what the paper quality was going to be like. And I had done some illustrations a year previously for an author and had a copy of her book, which happened to have been printed through CreateSpace. So I had paper samples. And then I got on Facebook and I said, hey, who do I know who has contacts at Ingram Spark? And turned out I know somebody who worked there, and she got me some paper samples. So I was looking at paper samples. What would I want to color on? And that's, I did the process that way. And that's how I ended up picking CreateSpace as my printer, simply, from the aspect of they both do print on demand, but who had the paper samples that I thought would be better quality for coloring on.
Oh, that's really interesting that you did the research between CreateSpace and Ingram Sparks and determined that you thought CreateSpace paper would work better for coloring. That's really an interesting take on it. With your designs, do you have a lot of different themes? You're up to 4 books, which when you think about that, that's quite prolific. Do you try to design your books in themes, or how do you go about coming up with those ideas?
Well, they are designed in themes. The first one, when Octopods Dream, is mostly because I was drawing octopuses. I make jewelry, and I like to play with polymer clay. So I make a lot of octopus jewelry. Tentacles are just fun to make. They're swoopy, and they have dots, and you can do all kinds of strange things with them. And so I also, I like drawing those shapes as well. So that's where the octopus one came from. Then, in a random conversation that I honestly don't know where it happened, but it stuck in my head, is somebody said, wouldn't it be cute if? And the idea was the moon falls in love with the sun. And I thought that would be adorable. And it turned into Celestial Love Song, which is a short story. It's an actual story with drawings and text pages that tell the story of the moon falling in love with the sun.
Oh, that does sound like a beautiful story.
And it's just this sweet little story. And I was drawing a lot of planets. Lots and lots of planets. And some of the planets weren't working for the need of Celestial Love Song. They were perfectly good illustrations, perfectly good drawings, but they didn't fit the story at all. And one day my kids were watching Men in Black, the very first one. And there was that great part where they say the galaxy's in Orion's belt. And they're talking about that marble on the cat's collar.
Uh-huh. I know that scene.
And there's a drawing in Psychedelic Marbles that is a galaxy inside of a marble. That came from that moment in time watching that movie that went, oh, that would be so cool. So the ideas just kind of come from wherever, whenever. And so I thought, hey, I have all of these planet images that I'm not using. And I have and I want to do this galaxy inside of a marble. And that's where the idea for Psychedelic Marbles came from.
Oh, I really like that. So you're really open to what presents itself to you, and then you just go with it. So
exactly.
Even though you were not happy with it for that one particular book, it lent itself to a whole entire new book. That's really cool. I really like that when people allow their creativity to just flow naturally and they accept, like, here it is, and then you can create such really cool things. So are you a colorer as well as an illustrator?
I'm one of those people who never gave up coloring books. I'm not an avid, crazed coloring person. I use cheap crayons. I don't have the expensive collection of Copic markers, and my really good colored pencils are from when I was in art school in the 80s. So some of them are down to little nubs. So I just color with whatever I have, but I've always colored. And, whether it's been the really pretty fancy coloring book that I'm almost too afraid to touch, or the Dollar Tree coloring book, just because it's like, I need to color something, get me something fun. So I do color, but I do draw more than I color.
So why do you think that adult coloring books are so popular? And like when you told me you started in June, and this interview happens to be in early April, so almost a year, maybe 9 months or so, but you've already produced 4 books, and people are buying coloring books. They buy them from Amazon, they buy them from Etsy, they go to the grocery store. Everywhere I go, I see adult coloring books. What is this all about in
Honestly,
your mind?
I think it's that we have permission to color. I'm not the only person I know who never gave up coloring. And I think it's a combination of a couple of things. One, it's permission to color again. In that you don't have to hide it. You're not stuck with the Dollar Kitty books. So there's that aspect of it. Then I think there's also the aspect that people are looking for therapeutic, meditative outlets. And they're really discovering that some of these books really let them get to that place of zen, if you want to call it zen, where they can just kind of relax, get rid of the stress, get rid of all of their worries just for that moment. They can really get in and relax and have that meditative moment. And they're feeling better about it, about their life. So they're realizing that this is helping them on not only a spirit, not that spiritual isn't quite the right word, but yeah, it almost is. But, that interpersonal level with stress and all of that stuff. Plus, it gives them that opportunity to be creative. They get to pick the colors. They may not have created the original drawing, but they're the ones who are bringing it to life and giving it color and giving it character and maybe adding texture. So I think it's a combination of different aspects. You're allowed to be creative. It's okay to color. And it's actually kind of good for your inner soul.
I think you've hit the nail on the head with that. And of course, if you read and look on Facebook or even in mainstream magazines and television programs, they're talking about there are true benefits to coloring for stress relief. And the more I think about it, we're bridging this real world, virtual world all the time. And many of us, for example, my job, I work on a computer all day long. Rarely do I need to do any type of tactile handwriting or anything like that. And at the end of the day, you just want to make a connection to something that's real that you can hold into your hand, and you want something to just take you back. It's like the old days when you hopped in the bathtub and soaked in Calgon, the Calgon take me away, and the coloring can do that. And the beauty is that you can color in little short spurts. So if you're commuting on a train or something like that where you're actually not the driver, you could color and kind of relax either on the way to work or on the way home or even during your lunch hour, or if you only have a 15-minute break. So with that, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned crayons. What other types of medium or media do you think are cool to color with? And is there any best way to color? I know that you do have an art background, and I think you've even produced some books related to, I guess, the technical aspects of coloring or matching colors. Talk a little bit about that.
I do have an art background, and I've taught art history. I have a series on my blog of color theory with crayons.
Oh, okay.
And what I've done is I've basically taken some of my color theory lectures from the various design or art history classes I've taught and put them together in a way that helped the colorist try to figure out coloring combinations. Even though there are a million, it seems like, palettes out there, you can go to like Pinterest or just get online and do a search color palettes. You can find these great color combinations. Sometimes, they're not going to give you the colors you need or colors you want. And sometimes you just want to know, how am I going to put colors together to make something work? And that's where color theory comes in. So I had a series on my blog where I talk about how to look at coloring combinations using complementary or split complementary or opposites or shading, lights and darks. And that series originated several years ago when I did a color theory using polymer clay article. And it's the same information, it's just a different tool, a different medium. So I revamped the information from using polymer clay, which is, a craft tool, to how that's going to work with markers and pencils and crayons.
I think that's a really good thing for people to look at if they're serious about coloring, because I read a lot of posts and sometimes people are disappointed because some color combination didn't work. And if you do just go look at, what colors are complementary or which colors contrast, you'll probably end up being much happier with your final piece of artwork. I want to switch gears now. And we touched on Create Space just a little bit, but I think the business of coloring, it's very, coloring book artists, many people come from the starving artists of maybe they were artists or designers or illustrators or painters, and that part of their business life never took off. And then they find coloring books, and boom, they now are often best-selling or selling authors, making some type of income from the coloring books. So I find that very interesting. So if I were wanting to get started as a coloring book author or publisher, give me a few tips on what I should do to get started.
Well, the first thing is draw. And don't be afraid to edit your work. A lot of people will sit there and go, well, I worked on this and it just didn't work. You know what? That's okay. Do the next one. The next one might work better. So for me, I have, I think there's 62 drawings in Celestial Love Song total, original drawings. I did over 80 drawings, to put in that. So, draw, constantly draw, and then edit yourself. Don't worry about putting everything you draw into a book. That's the first part. Second part is become a little bit familiar with the print process, the way print on demand works. And one of the things I've seen in a lot of the online groups is there's some confusion as to how print on demand process actually works. It's not as intimidating as I think a lot of people think it is, just because they're not familiar with it. Get on Create Space or get on Ingram Spark and just look at their information articles on how this whole process works, just to become familiar with it. See how a printing press, for a print-on-demand printing press, it's nothing like your little desktop printer. It's not sheet-fed. There are huge rolls of paper that are going through these machines at great speeds. So familiarize yourself a little bit, just so that you kind of see, oh, that's what they're doing when I send my files off. And to understand why they ask you to set your files up a certain way. It can, like I said, it can be really confusing if you're not from the print industry, to understand what's this thing called bleed and why do I need it and why does it need to be a certain size? Or live area, why does live area have to be a certain size inside the page edge when I want my pictures to be this way inside the page edge? And all of that has to do with the industry of printing. And, they've got to trim your books a certain way. And if you don't have the image going off enough, you might get a mistrim. And that's when they cut the books. And they cut the books in bulk, They don't sit there and make one little book at a time and cut it. They print as many books of that exact same size as they can and run them through the choppers all at the same time. They're in the job of mass production, even if they're mass producing individual pieces. They're trying to get as many of the same size done at the same time. And there's a ton of information online so that you can go look it up, research it. And don't be afraid to email those companies and ask them for paper samples. A lot of artists are really concerned. Hey, what's the paper going to be like? And they'll see reviews on Amazon, and I have some reviews on Amazon where they hate the paper. They absolutely hate the paper. And it's like, well, I don't really have any control over the paper because it is a print-on-demand industry. And until they start offering other paper choices, I'm stuck with what they're going to give me, which is why I wanted to see what the printing paper was like at all the different companies, so that I could make that best tactile decision. So, ask questions of the industry. Ask, get online, say, hey, how does this work? Ask them for paper samples. Set yourself up a little sample book. Follow the information specifications they give you exactly, and find out, it's like, oh, they really are in the business of helping you to print. So when they give you specifications, it's not to be a thorn in the artist's side. It's to help that artist produce the best work that they can within the specification parameters of that printing equipment. So do some, look stuff up, do some research, and, order a sample. Ask a friend, hey, it's getting to be the point where we all know each other. Ask one of your artist friends, hey, you self-publish, you print through these guys, can I see one of your books? Or order one of their books, Everybody loves a sale. So
right. Support your fellow artists, and you'll learn a lot by examining what their books look like, and you'll see how the sizes are, what color the paper is, what the covers look like, and at the same time you'll be supporting other author, illustrator people. I think your advice is really, really good. Do the research, educate yourself, and don't be afraid to make a mistake, because, for example, in CreateSpace, you might send the file and they will send it back to you if you're outside of their parameters. When they put the sample together, they will actually show you, oh, you're over the edges here, or your margins are too narrow. So I really think that that's really good advice, but do it. The big lesson that I think I'm learning from coloring book artists is make a coloring book and get it out there in any way, shape, or form. Use CreateSpace. It was designed to be a self-publishing platform, and if you follow the guidelines, just like what you said, Laura, is learn about the printing process, and once you do that, it'll probably eliminate 90% of all the fear you have about creating and publishing your own coloring books. And if people don't like the paper, well, you made a decision based on the best you could do with what you had, and you also have to consider keeping it within the price that someone is going to actually pay to get access to that coloring book also. Because
exactly,
you could price yourself out of the market if you try to get too fancy. And I know a lot of people are talking about colorists would love to have perforations. They would love to have spiral binding, and people are experimenting with that, but all of those things make the book itself cost a little bit more in the long run. So before we sign off, how do we learn more about you, and where do we get more information?
You can go to my website, which is lauramedeiros.com, and that is Lauramedeiros.com.
Okay. I will also make sure that there's a live link in the show notes for everyone. Before I let you go, is there anything that you think that people should know, either as someone who wants to be in the coloring book author business or as a colorist?
For people who want to be a coloring book artist, draw. Just draw. Draw everything, draw anything, draw patterns, draw what you see, draw what you love. I can't emphasize just draw, because you'll find somebody who wants to color in what you love. Absolutely.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Laura.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
This is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a great day.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.